Welcome to Let's Talk Near Death, the podcast show where we talk about life, death, and experiences somewhere in between. My name is Kirsty Salisbury, the host of the show, and I welcome you to join me as I talk to everyday people with not so everyday experiences. You may also wish to join the conversation on the Let's Talk Near Death Facebook page or access additional VIP content as a premium subscriber via Patreon. For just a couple of dollars a month, you can get an early access to episodes, additional bonus content, and your chance to connect with my guests. To do so, simply visit patreon.com/Kirsty Salisbury. Let's talk near death.
When I was 15, I got really sick. All of a sudden one night I woke up, I felt like death. And I felt like I fell out of my body. Then I saw a beautiful lady. She came floating in with this beautiful, beautiful white lace dress.
Today I'm talking with Janet Tarantino, who had a mystical adventure when she suffocated due to an allergy. Her experience was both powerful and enlightening, where she saw God, Jesus, the Holy Spirit, a guardian angel, and other spiritual beings. She was shown moments of her life that haven't happened yet, and was told to remember them as they did matter. Janet is also the author of her brand new book, Dying to See, Revelations about God, Jesus, and our pathways to the nature of the soul. So Janet Tarantino, welcome to Let's Talk Near Death. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Kirsty, for having me. I appreciate it.
It's going to be fantastic. Congratulations on your book. I'm so excited for you. At the time of recording, this came out yesterday, so it'll be a couple of weeks later by the time our listeners are listening. But your book, congratulations, it's fantastic. It's quite a labour, isn't it, to get one out?
Yes, thank you. It is a labor of love. That's what it is.
Exactly. Oh, definitely. But there's a lot of energy there. So your near-death experience, take us back. When did all this start? When did it happen?
Well, I've had three. The most in-depth one was about 20 years ago. But all this started when I was a little girl. You know how they say that kids under 5 or 6, the veil doesn't come down yet, so that they don't, the forgetfulness. But when I was 4, I was 4 or 5. I was waiting for the rest of the kids to get home from school, and they hadn't gotten home yet. My mom was on a phone call, and they were talking about adoption. And I asked my mom when she got off the phone, was I adopted? And she said, no, silly, you're our little girl. But the next thing that came out of my mouth was something I never will forget, because I said, okay, but then I'm going to die young. And when I said that, I contemplated what young meant, and all of a sudden I saw visions of 3 different images, at least 3, maybe more, but those 3 ended up being the time frames that I had my near-death experiences.
Oh, wow.
And so I was actually seeing my pages of the Book of Life. And time went on that I just kind of ignored things that were going on because they seemed natural. But when I was 15, I got really sick. We had went to a picnic with all the larger family members, and a few days after that, I got really ill. It lasted longer than an average state of flu. So my mom took me to the doctor. And then they started making sure I had a lot of fluids. But in that time frame, mom slept with me because I was so sick. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden one night I woke up like death. I felt like death. I could feel like a humming in my ears, and my mouth was watering. And all of a sudden my eyes went up, kind of in the back of my head, and I felt like I fell out of my body. Well, as I fell out of my body, then I saw an angelic watcher, and I saw a beautiful lady. She came floating in with this beautiful, beautiful white lace dress. And I had worked just previous to that, earning money to make some, buy some clothes for my new first year of high school. And I was looking forward to this particular meeting at the school. They invited all the kids in to get accustomed to the school first for one day, and they could walk around and find their lockers and everything. But anyway, this beautiful lady stuck in my head, and I always thought of her as the music box lady because of the beautiful music she came floating in on. It was just music that you can't even imagine. And I also thought of her as the music box lady and Daddy's little girl. And at one point during this situation, this event, she started moving up and away because when she first came in, I wasn't interested in her so much as I was interested in the dress she wore because I was interested in fashion. Mm-hmm. And so some other part of the experience happened, but then when she moved up and away, she left for a little bit, and the other guy, who happens to be a sumo wrestler, strange, I know, but he was just watching me. But the watchers are in the Bible as angelic beings. But then when she came back, the holes, because of the ceiling had turned to clouds, and there was two openings, one opening over here and another opening over here. And the left one was where the sumo wrestler was and the beautiful lady. Well, later I recognize her. I recognized her about a year or so after I started planning this book, because I drew everything that I had seen. And then I saw a picture, and the picture was at my mom and dad's house, and I thought, that reminds me of something. It was my daughter. And so what had happened was my daughter's spirit had come to me during that first experience and wanted to make sure I got back in my body because she wanted to be born. And she wasn't even conceived until 15 years after this experience. And I was not privy to what their conversation was, probably because then I'd always be looking for the right man. Mm. And I would have searched. So I must have been privy to it to think of her as Daddy's little girl at that time, 15, yet when I was 15. So that kind of shows us that parts of our life are planned, and parts of our life we work together with other people in our life to manage our journey through earth, through this earthly life. And then the second one was a divine intervention during a car accident. I was saved. But then all this led up to the third one, where I suffocated to death. And because I had put all the rest of them behind, at 15, I was still in that age where I was more interested in dating. So I put all that aside and tucked it away, never forgot about it. And then the car accident, kind of opened my awareness again to something that was going on.
What age were you when the car accident happened?
I imagine I was in my 30s.
Okay. So somewhere
in my 30s, because it was the third one was 20 years previous to now, and then that one would have been at least 5 to 10 years previous to that. I didn't keep track of the dates. But on this one, I had an allergy, like you said. I didn't know, it was the first time I'd had it. So I thought it was a seasonable allergy that would go away, and because it was fall. But it didn't. And I didn't recognize that it had happened in the house versus out of the house. So when I went in the house, I would get congested, and because I thought it was a ranch, so I thought it was hay or something that I was dealing with. And I went to bed at night after I'd taken a decongestant, and I had propped myself up on 3 pillows, so I was at a 45-degree angle so I could breathe better. And my husband was in bed with me, beside me. And all of a sudden, I felt a tightening in my chest, and it hurt, but I didn't have the energy to get up and get a breath of air. So I reached for my husband, and I couldn't feel him. So I called for him, and I said, "Gavin, help me, please help me." And there was no response. So all of a sudden, I popped out of my body, and I was up the ceiling, looking down on myself and my husband below. I felt ecstatic. I felt free. I felt like I had been just released from a balloon that had been expanded to its max and all of a sudden broke and I was released into the air. I felt like I had just taken a huge breath of fresh air. It was so magnificent. And then when I looked around, I was in blackness, which made sense because it was the middle of the night. So, this blackness was velvety, and it was a velvety love that was enfolding me. And I felt imbued with the most profound peace, love, and tranquility that you can imagine. And I felt at one with the universe, and I felt like this was normal. This was the way it's supposed to be, and that I had been here before. Somehow I knew I had been here before. But as I looked down on my body, I was kind of interested in looking at it, and just that interest put me down next to my body. And as I looked at my body, I noticed on the side of my nose, I must have gotten small enough to look at the features of my body, because I've noticed the pores on my nose. And every day I wake up and I put my makeup on because I want to look good for whatever happens that day, just for me. It's not important for anybody else. But so when I looked at that, I thought, I'm going to really have to make sure I put more makeup there to cover that up.
Oh, the things you think about when you're outside your body.
Things you think about, yes. So then all of a sudden I was up at the ceiling again. And I saw a pin of light coming from the right. But as I was up there, I could feel my energetic arms floating out to my side, and they were elongated because they were floating free and in weightlessness. But I also I saw a silver cord float by in front of me, which I didn't know what that was, but I did notice it. And that silver cord they talk about for astral traveling, and they also talk about it in the Bible. And in the Bible it says, remember him before the silver cord is snapped and the golden bowl is crushed, before the pitcher is shattered at the spring, and the dust returns, you will see the silver cord. So it's the silver cord that attaches us to the heavenly realm, and when it is a way for us to stay connected. But in any case, now I saw something lifting out of my physical body below. I saw a blue, mystic, silver, shimmering form that was lifting out of my feet and then my shins and up to my thighs. And as it lifted, I could feel it drawing up toward me. What I was my spirit, my share of God's spirit that had already left the upper part of my body, and I was now watching the rest of my spirit leave the lower half of my body, and it was now drawing up to me. I guess you could explain it like a fisherman pulling a fish in. I was drawing my energetic force up out of the rest of my body, and as I did draw up. Well, did I mention it was the color of the sky? It was the color of the sky of a beautiful day. And then as it drew up to me, I could feel my energetic arms pulling in, and I was changing shape. I was morphing. And as I came together again, I was the shape of an orb. I was now in the form of an orb, and I was being held in a wand of love. And there had been some other experiences that had taken place. I call it the ambush makeover. I call this whole thing my ambush makeover, because he was making me over to be, he had saved me in that accident. And an angel had saved me, or he had saved me, or the sumo wrestler, and now he wanted the honor that was due him. And because it says in the Bible, I will send the angels to protect you and save you, and you will honor me. So he had reworked my entire being at one point in my life, because I had started stuttering, and everything. My life had fallen apart, because he was remaking me. And I'll tell you why, because in this, as I go on, I'll go on and explain it. But as I looked down, I saw this, it was drawing into me, and I felt in this wand of love. And then this light zipped in, and it was an orb. It was a light of orb. And then it grew up into a spiritual being, a beautiful spiritual being that's featured on my Facebook page. It's the closest I could get to it. And it radiated light. And I couldn't see its face at first because the light was so magnificent, and he had light rays coming out of his heart center. Initially, I thought it was an angelic, holy angelic woman, but it wasn't. It ended up being Jesus. And he said, "It's time to come home, Jan." And he put his arm out to me, and he said, "Jan, it's time to come home." Mm-hmm. And my first thought was my daughter, because we're real close. And he, without asking, he said, "She'll be okay." So I was going to go. But in the meantime, this other light had come up from the distance on the left, and it had grown and grown and grown into a huge light of energy, and the light of energy was alive, and I knew this was God in all of his essence. Mm-hmm. And he had kind of a cornucopia shape because of the clouds that swirled around the opening. And even though this light radiated white rays, I could feel the color in him, the color of heaven. But now that God, he reached out with his energetic rainbow arms, and he embraced me, and he pulled me toward him. And while he was embracing me, I knew that I was perfect in every way, and that he knew everything about my life, and everything I had done was fine. And then he showed me moments of my life that some had already happened, but some had not, because they hadn't happened. Mm-hmm. And he wanted me, he told me, understand these moments, they mattered. Well, I wanted to understand him, but I wanted to understand him in heaven. I
Sure.
understood my daughter was going to be well, and I knew everything was as it should be. But he had other plans for me. So then, as he released me, angels came, and they took my arms, and they took me up in the air. And I could see my ranch, my husband, and my body laying in bed, and I could see pins of light coming up the road. These tiny pins of light was an ambulance that was coming to save me. Mm. But as I watched it, even though it was so far away, I could feel the bumps of the road like I was in the ambulance. Mm. I could hear the crunch of the gravel like I was down, my ear was down next to the tire. Mm. And as it lurched in a particular part of our driveway, I could feel that lurch. And I could see down below, I could see all the countryside. I had all perspectives, which told me that my sliver of God's spirit, it can be everywhere at all times, just like God can, because I am my portion of his spirit.
Mm.
Then they went in, and I was okay. I was far enough out in the country where they couldn't save me from the suffocation. So he was showing me my death, and I was fine with that. And then the last thing they showed me, so I was then again down before the light of God. And they showed me one more thing. That one more thing was important to me because it was my son. And I knew, and when they showed me that picture, I'm talking about God, the Father, the Holy Spirit, all of them, heaven, something was going to happen to him. And if I wasn't here, he would go down a darker pathway. And that again shows you that things in our life are planned. And we work together. So I, at that moment, knew I had to stay, and I told Jesus, I'm not ready to go yet. And he smiled. I could tell he smiled, and even though I couldn't really see his face, and he nodded his head. So I turned back into that blue spirit body, and I sat my butt down in her butt, and I slipped one leg into each leg, and I grabbed my spirit knees, and I rocked back and forth until I could get the momentum up to snap back in her body and help her sit up for air, which she did. She managed to get her air, and then I settled back into her body to help her along her journey. Now, I had to live my entire life as Jan. I felt transformed after all of this, and I quit being calling Jan. I then started to introduce myself as Janet, because I was no longer the person that I was before. I knew things that I didn't know before, and I knew that our spirit, our consciousness is where our memories are, because I had all my memories. I knew who I was in this lifetime. So I knew our consciousness was in our soul, not in the human brain. And I knew that God was always with us through my spirit. So I knew that every moment of my life, God was with me. And I knew our spirit was here to guide and protect us as much as possible. Now, how he does that, he gives it like our gut feeling that pushes us in one direction or another. And this makes me remember one time when I was probably 5 or 6 years old. It was a long time ago, and it was before televisions. I'm that old. And the kids played outside. And Mom used to fix dinner for everybody when Dad got home around 5:30, 6 o'clock. And my two brothers, who are fraternal twins and older than I am. I have a sister who's 5 years younger. But my brothers hadn't come home yet. And so she asked me to go out and see if they were in shouting distance that I could get them to come home. So I went out and looked at the swing set, and then I went out and I looked at one down the street in one direction and down the street in the other direction, and I didn't see them. But I did see a man out on the porch a couple of houses down. So I walked across my neighbor's yard and I yelled as far as I could, "Are my brothers in your house?" And he said, "No, but would you like to come and check for yourself?" And I had this bad feeling and a sense of discomfort. And then I heard this subtle voice say, "Leave." Well, so I followed that guidance, and I told him no, and I left, and then I ran home. But I never told my mom about it, because it just, I just kind of discounted it. But years later, we found out he was a child molester. I don't know where my brothers were. They did eventually come home, and the life got on. But that just shows you how our spirit does nudge us in one direction or another. Um, and I had to live my life knowing, wondering when the other shoe was going to drop for my son. Eventually it did, and as God works in His ways, He had my son, because my marriage fell apart. Like 75% of near-death experiencers, marriage fall apart because we don't know each other anymore, or too many strange things happen. Because during that time frame, after this happened, I had the electrical phenomena going on, and my watches kept dying, and he would bring me home another one, and it would die, and he'd bring me home another one, and it would die. And so I was thinking, man, he's really not buying me very nice watches.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah. And then we would finally go out and buy new batteries for them. So we'd go buy the best batteries on the market, and they would die. Everything would die. And then my energy would set off unusual things in the house. The phone would ring, and I'd answer the phone, and nobody was there. So then I was thinking, it was happening enough times. I was thinking, okay, he's having an affair, and they're hanging up on me. Well,
no.
It was just in that time frame where caller ID came on the market, and so I'd get the number when it would ring, and I would immediately go and call that number back. And then I'd get this recording say, you have reached a number that has been disconnected or no longer in service, every time. Now, what are the chances that that would happen? You might get a wrong number, or they wouldn't know what you're talking about, but I'd always get this recording. So it just threw me off. And then because, as I sat down in my body, I forgot to tell you this. This is one of the most important parts. I kept hearing an echoing voice from heaven, and it was echoing, love is the only thing that matters. Love is the only thing that matters. Love is the only thing that matters. So after all of this was over, near-death experiencers are more compassionate, and my husband was a jealous man, and so he didn't like me going certain places because there might be somebody there I might be interested in, and there was no chance of that. But he was concerned about it, which caused a bit of conflict in my life. And then, of course, with these other calls, that added to the conflict. And then also, I could feel the energy of places. So when we went to shopping there, before I was fine, but then we would go, and I could feel the energy of all the people, and it was like it was hitting me from all directions, and I'd get nauseous and faint. So I finally have to ask him if he could finish the shopping, and I'll go back to the car, and I'd have to wait there. Well, I didn't know that this was common for near-death experiencers. All these things are common, but this was before I knew about any of this stuff, so there was no explanation. And then outside, we would be walking back to the house, and the yard light would flicker that we had out there. And I kept saying, we need to get that fixed. But every time we went in, we forgot about it for the night. But after the divorce, I asked him, did you ever get that light fixed? And he said, no, not necessary. It works fine. So now that I was gone.
Yeah.
Yes. So it was, and as I was explaining, he had my son, Kurt, invite me to come live with him at one point during the divorce situation, because I had left the house and was living out at my mom and dad's. And so I said, sure, I'd be happy to do that. And so we ended up sharing an apartment together so that he could have a nicer place. That's what it was. I think he wanted a little bit nicer place. And then his his lesson started. We lived in a college community, and he loved to dance, and because he was in that age range, so they went out to a Western dance where they had the country dancing. And when he and his friends left, he was driving, and he got pulled over. Well, not less than a half a mile from the place. Anyway, he blew over the limit, and got charged, and ended up losing his license. And so he had to take classes. And I noticed that one day I noticed that he hadn't seen him, hadn't heard anything about his classes, and I hadn't taken him. And I said, "How come I haven't taken you or heard anything about your classes lately?" And he was looking into the bedroom at the time, and he said, "I not going, because I just don't see any light at the end of the tunnel." The supervisor, the guy, doesn't like him. And so I said, "Kurt, you won't see any light at the end of the tunnel, and he won't like you until you do what you're supposed to do, and then you'll get there." But when I said that sentence, I saw a light go on over his head. And from that moment on, he did everything that he was supposed to do. And now he was a supervisor at a large company, and beautiful daughter that's 9 years old. So it was that one sentence that I needed to be there for, because that's what turned the light on over his head and set him on a pathway to get to where he is today. So it just shows you how powerful one sentence can be in a person's life, and how important we are in each other's lives. Well, we need to wake up every day, thinking, where's God taking me today? Who is he showing me? Who is working in these miracles in our life? And this is a big adventure. This is a fantastic adventure through life, and our choices can change the direction of what we go. So I'm thoroughly amazed and honored that he did this for me, and let me remember these moments, that there's always a bigger picture going on, and everything is a lesson, and everybody can get through it, especially if you realize that God is with you. We oftentimes put up our own roadblocks, saying, "I can't do that," or I don't have time for that. But if we would follow through on some of these things that we think we don't have time for, or we're not qualified for, we'll get there. We can always get over these problems. Everything's temporary and overcomable.
I absolutely love this. I love that you've talked about that one sentence, how you saw the light bulb go on and it changed everything, because I think we can get so hung up on purpose, and we can get so hung up on our mission in our life has to be this big extravagant thing, and we're constantly looking for the big thing. But actually, often our life purpose can be the smallest thing, like you said, just giving somebody a message, saying one sentence. And I just love that you're totally confirming what I believe in my heart, and how if we can come back daily and just check in and say, okay, what have we got for life today? What is it that you want me to say? Where do you want me to be? Where do I focus my moments and my attention? So Janet, that has warmed my heart. Literally, as you're speaking, I'm just feeling all these bubbles and just this warmth of reinstating, confirming that purpose doesn't need to be something huge.
Yeah, it doesn't. I mean, this is an example that unusual things kept popping up. It's, these different things are in my book, which we haven't had time to talk about. I'd had a soul painting done, and I didn't know what that was at the time. It was a coupon that came up, and I was interested because I saw my soul, and I thought they'd paint my soul, what a picture of my soul looked like. And so I asked my daughter if she wanted to go with me, and she did. We went. But what she drew, she told me that this soul painting, Teresa Dunwell, and she said a soul painting is you come and I connect with the heavenly records with your permission, and they show me what to paint. And what I paint is meaningful to you, the sitter. And so when she was painting, about 45 minutes into it, it was just a small painting, and each color was representative. Like yellow was an intellect, and orange was your creativity, purple was your intuitiveness. And she kept saying, you're more intuitive than you realize you are at that time. And she drew what I saw. I was expecting the color blue, but she drew Jesus and the tunnel beside him and blew me away. She was 45 minutes in, I asked my daughter, "Do you recognize that?" And she said, yes, she did, because she recognized it too. And so I went away from there wondering, what am I supposed to do? Why does he keep showing me all this stuff? And I was confused. So finally I went to bed and I prayed, and I said it in a way that I really didn't want an answer, because I said, "Dear Father in heaven, please tell me what to do. You just got to tell me what to do. And if I don't get an answer, I will know it's just for me." So I went to sleep expecting no answer, nor really wanting one. But when I woke up, I heard his voice say, "Make it about me." And then I knew, I spent the day, be careful what you ask for, see what happens, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So then I had to sit down and figure out how to write a book. And because he had showed me visions of me writing a book, and he had showed me visions of me speaking about it. And I didn't think I could do any of this. And he was showing me that he knew I could do more than the limitations I had placed on myself. So we can overcome anything, and we can do more than we think we can. So then I had to write the book. That's what I ended up doing.
Yeah. So how long did the book take you to write?
Gosh, it took me probably 5 years. And the reason for that is because I took care of my parents during their final years. So that was 5 years of it. Part of the time I could write, but as they aged and got, more dependent, then I couldn't write as much as I could. But they were alive to read the book. And my mother loved it, and she kept saying, "When are you going to get this published?" But there was no way I could, because it was 24-hour care at that time, and their death was amazing in itself. I mean, because I asked them to share with me everything that they saw, everything they felt, and everything they sensed during their dying process, and they both said that they would. And it was an amazing journey through that. And as mom, before mom passed away, she could say, she was saying, "Hold me down, I'm floating, because her spirit was starting to leave her body. So she knew what was going on, but it was still a little frightening to her. And so we would place our hands on her, and that would bring her body back. But before she passed away, my dad died, and amazingly enough, I caught his spirit leaving his body on film. And I will be posting that. I've had Bob, my boyfriend, blur out some of the image of him, but I just happened to, and I didn't see it when I was filming it. I was filming to count the time between his breaths. And
because that's one of the things at the end of life, isn't it? The longer the period.
Yes. And so I was starting and stopping the film, and then at the very end, I left it filming because I had caught his last breath, and I didn't see it until much time later when I downloaded the film and I started looking at it on the camera. Then I saw the energy leave his body, and I was just shocked. And it leaves so fast that it looks like it's going to the right, but when you slow the image down, it's going to the left, and which makes sense because that was the direction my mom was in, because they were both dying at the same time. And then she knew she felt comfortable with him leaving because she was basically staying around for him. And then a couple of days after he passed away, she was saying something, and I said, "What are you saying?" "I didn't hear you, Mom." "Would you?" "Oh, I'm singing to the song. Don't you hear the song?" And I said, "No, what's the song?" He says, "It's Good Night, Sweetheart." And the song goes, "Good night, sweetheart. It's time for me to go. Good night, sweetheart." And it was perfect. And I said, "That's got to be Dad." And she said, "Yes, I believe it is." And so 9 days after he passed, she died. And the night before she died, she was seeing her best friend and her sister, and she kept saying there's a gathering going on, because she would look up to heaven as she was laying there. And I said, "Is it getting bigger as it goes along?" She said, "Yes." And then the last person she saw, she said, "Dick." And I said, "That's Dad." And I said, "You see Dad?" And she said, "Yeah." And she said, "And he looks so sharp, so sharp." She also saw my brother too, who had passed away too. And then the last thing she asked my dad was, "How'd you get that?" And I'll never know what that is. I wonder what that was.
Yeah, you must be wondering for a long time.
Yeah. So that confirms too that we go on. So, but he had always told her, and they had always said they would walk into heaven together. So obviously he had come back to take her hand and take her into heaven, like they always said that they would. I thought that was such a fabulous story.
It's so beautiful. I've got goosebumps just listening to that. It is just beautiful. And I love to hear stories of people right at the end of life, right before death takes hold. Not because I'm some morbid person that likes to hear about death, but I like these stories, the things that you've said.
They're fantastic.
It's just such a privilege to see them, to hear them, to connect right in those processes. And what you say, I've heard other accounts which are fairly similar, and I honestly just think it's a privilege. I just think it's beautiful. Thank you.
And I'm working on a second book.
Already?
The second book has other people's experiences like this, and some of the stories are just, they're just amazing. So
I look forward to that one. That's fabulous. So I want to go back a little bit. I've got a lot of my mind's going in all different directions here, but I want to go back to the near-death experience and ask you, what were your spiritual beliefs before your first one, I guess?
I never thought about it. I mean, I just my mom and dad were Christian, and so they'd go to church, but we would, we were kids. We didn't want to go, and finally we whined enough where they let us stay home and play. I just assumed there was something. I always figured there was a greater power, but I just never really thought about it because it was just too far away for me to even consider. And then that was during the first one, and then the same with the second one. I knew there was a higher power, but this kind of cinched it for me because of the arms that saved me. So I knew that there was something there, but I didn't really know what to do about it because I still hadn't heard about near-death experiences. So I didn't figure anybody would believe me. So I just kept it to myself. And but then this one just kind of, I kept this one to myself for years too, because I thought people would think I was crazy. And but then after he kept showing me all this stuff and told me I needed to write a book, I really had no choice in the matter. I needed to start doing. I've shared with my daughter. I shared with certain family members that knew me, knew I would make up this stuff, knew I was a healthy person, and so I did share with them. But then, because my first initial tries I shared at church with one lady, and she backed away from me and she'd say it's the devil, and she backed away. And so I quit sharing, and I thought, I was kind of a bit upset that somebody from church would first think of the devil rather than being so happy that it was, the work of God. And so I was very hesitant to even share, but then I had to. I have not shared in the church setting except for once. I mean, it was kind of I wanted to join this church. I liked this church because it was good people. And so they had summit meetings that you were supposed to go to. And they did a personality analysis so that they could tell where you would be comfortable if you wanted to volunteer. I mean, everything was, volunteer. If you wanted to, if you didn't, that was perfectly fine. And we had the third summit meeting that I was second summit meeting that I went to, they were talking about the gifts that God gave you, because this analysis would analyze what kind of gifts that God gave you, whether it was faith or compassion, those kind of things. So I was anxious to go to this meeting, and I wanted to hear what they had to say. But as they started this session, one of the questions she asked is, has anybody had any mystical experiences? Well, I had been keeping quiet about all this stuff, and I was afraid to tell anybody. And this was right at the same time that Heaven is for Real came out in the movie theaters, about the little boy that had the near-death experience. And one of the gentlemen was talking about the experience and thinking he wasn't sure if it was really real because of how he identified the grandfather, which in the movie it was different than it actually was in the book. The book was more compelling, but they did it for certain reasons in the movie. But I was still silent. So I was kind of sitting with my head down, rubbing my forehead because I didn't want to say anything, but I knew I should. But then the spirit who's inside of you started wiggling its butt back and forth in my butt. It really did. It was like I could feel it moving back, like it would say something, recognize me. And I kept saying, covering my face. And finally, it was like time slowed, and it was like neon signs were up here pointing at me, like she had one, and I knew I had to say something. So finally I said, yes, how safe is it here? And they said, very safe. And I said, well, then I've died and have went to heaven, and heaven is real. And I just started spilling it out, and everybody I could see the images on my face of the faces that were looking at me then. And then the class stopped, and I showed the teacher the pictures I drew, and they took a break for a while and talked to me and said that because I had called the church previous to that about spiritual guidance, because I was told to go share my experience with the church, which I was trying to do, and they didn't call me back, which bothered me too. But when he finally did call me back, he said his assistant was off for a month, and he was way behind. He apologized for that, and he did believe my rendition, and he did say I could share my story, but I had to make sure that God got the credit. Well, who would I give the credit to? So I was thinking, after that, I was thinking, why did I do that? God is the one that needs to get credit, not. I didn't need to ask him if it was okay. So I went on my life, and here's where I am now. So
wonderful, thank you. I find it so interesting that you have such a strong, I guess, element in your experiences of Jesus and of God and heaven, and things which, if you haven't grown up in a particular environment or been exposed to particular beliefs, that they're so strong. So I wanted to get the backing around that. So thank you.
Thank
With
you.
your daughter, is she quite spiritual as well? Does she I guess I want to hear a bit of story in there, but my main question coming back to your daughter is, does she have any memory, pre-birth memory or connection from that experience when she was in the dress? Or
No, she doesn't remember it. But most daughters, you have a connection usually with the like male to male, woman to woman. But we've always been very close, and I always thought maybe something was bothering her. She said no. She said, I've always just liked you. I like you as a person.
Well,
I want to be
good.
around you, which I thought, oh, that is so nice. Because you don't hear your kids thinking they like you. They love you because you're their parent. But I've never heard of one liking you. So I was very touched by that. She is spiritual. She always has kind of felt the energy around. And now that, this has happened, things are falling, the puzzle pieces are all falling into place. Yes, she's a Reiki master. And, she's got her own pathway that she's taking. So I support her in that. My two sons are, they just, they believe me and everything, but this is not what their path takes them. May someday. Although my son did have an angelic experience that's in the book too. So.
Oh, wow. Fantastic. Sounds like your whole family's just getting these beautiful experiences. And then I'm thinking about the deathbed experience of your parents, and it's just amazing, isn't it? It's just lovely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, people discount things that happen. They're actually angelic experiences or mystical experiences, but they keep saying, no, that couldn't have happened. I'm just imagining that, or there's got to be another reason for it. That's our ego getting in the way. The ego wants to get in the way of what God has to show us. So.
I think that's so true. Now, I know that you had an experience when you were writing your book.
Well, I had written the book, and I had received a proof so that I could read through the proof, because you find more errors when you read through a paper rendition of it. And it was a beautiful day, and this wasn't that long ago, because we were still in lockdown. So I was out walking in the neighborhood, and I thought, well, okay, I'll read my book while I walk. And so I did. And as I was walking, I noticed the pages were glowing. The edges of the pages were glowing. And I thought it was me, because after being wrapped in his rainbow arms, sometimes I can see auras and in energy. So I thought, okay, it's me. But then I thought, okay, I'm going to stop and take a picture of it, because it was really bright. And I have it on my Facebook page, but that's an expanded view of it. And you can't really get the entire gist of it unless you look at it on your phone, because it was radiating with the rainbow colors. And I couldn't believe my eyes that it was doing that. So, but I did get a picture of it to make sure I was actually seeing what I was seeing. That was pretty amazing.
That's wonderful, isn't it? It's so exciting when there's a spiritual element to the work that we're doing on a practical way as well. It's wonderful. Janet, of everything that you've experienced, of the relationships you've had with your family and with God and the way things are working for you, is there one key message that you have? Is there one thing that you want people to hear or to learn from the experiences that you've had?
Sure. Love is the only thing that matters. That was the message from heaven. Love is the only thing that matters. And we should live every day weighing what we say to people, and being compassionate, and spreading positivity versus negativity, and lifting our fellow people up versus putting them down. Life is a journey, and just think of your own life. If somebody had said a negative thing or a positive thing, and the positive thing would lift you up. Yes, love is the only thing that matters. That was the big message from heaven.
It's so beautiful and such an important message. Janet Tarantino, Thank you so much. We wish you the best with your book. We're going to put the links for where people can get your book. If you're listening and you haven't heard of it yet, please go and have a look at that book. We would love to stay in touch here about the next book that's coming up. And I just want to say a huge thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Kirsty. This has been fabulous. This is my favorite subject.
Thanks for joining me on this episode of the Let's Talk Near Death podcast show. If you've enjoyed it, please share it with your friends, tell people about it. I'd love to get these messages out there. Don't forget you can also pick up your VIP access pass for additional content at patreon.com/Kirsty Salisbury. You can connect with us via the Let's Talk Near Death Facebook page, and I look forward to catching you for another episode soon.